Welcome to the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Tina Clark. I have a guest today, Terry Tucker, who I actually interviewed on my previous podcast, My Weirdest Experience. And if you want to check that out, that's season 1, episode 42. It's still out there. And Terry is like the podcast guest extraordinaire. He's been on 700 podcasts. And he's done so many interesting things in his life. He's been a SWAT negotiator. He's been a basketball coach. And he is here to talk about his healing journey with cancer. And I'd love to welcome Terry to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Well, Tina, thanks for having me. It's great seeing you again. And I'm looking forward to this conversation as well.
Yeah, so you've had quite a lot of health struggles. So why don't you start from the beginning and tell us what happened?
Sure. So 2012, I'm a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, and I have a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And initially don't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received a call from him that I think we all dread in our lives. And like I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. Until finally he just laid it out. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun. It affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. Mine had nothing to do with sun exposure. It's a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because my cancer was so uncommon, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. And so I did. Excuse me. So they excised the bottom of my foot, took out the tumor, took out all the lymph nodes in my groin, and then gave me the great news of more than likely you will be dead in 2 years because we have absolutely no treatment or therapy to offer you. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 12 plus years now.
So as a holistic healer, that type of statement just gives me shivers because I never talk to my clients that way, no matter if they have cancer or if they have any kind of health issue, because you're alive now. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do my best to keep you there and thriving. And I think that's the importance of words. So I think that was good that you didn't take that as the end. And you have like a warrior energy to you. Tell us your favorite Winston Churchill quote, because you said it off camera.
Yeah, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II, had this great quote that I love and I think about all the time. He said, when you're going through hell, keep going. And I've been through a lot of hell through this cancer journey, as well as my family and my friends and things like that. And, you know, you just get to a point sometimes where you want to quit, you want to give up. And you just like, no, I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. This is not beating me. And, you know, you make a great point. And I always used to talk about my doctors kind of like Vegas. You know, they play the odds. They look at you as a human being and say, okay, you're a person of this age in this health capacity with this basically level of cancer. We expect you to live X number of years. But what doctors don't know is that they don't know you want to see your daughter graduate from high school or graduate from college or walk her down the aisle or play with your grandkids. And that ability to look forward to something that's good in your life can really keep your body going. It's more controlling your mind so that you can control your body. And that was it for me. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to take your word for it. You don't know me. You don't know what I want. You're just putting me in a box as a doctor. And I understand why they do it, and I didn't die, and I was very lucky. But Tina, I've also seen people, and maybe you've had clients like this, that were like, the doctor says, okay, you're going to die in 2 years. And literally almost on the 2-year anniversary, they die. They're like, I'll take
why?
whatever the doctor says. And that's the way it's going to be.
You know why? I'll tell you why. And this is where we get into the esoteric and the spiritual side of things, because to say something like that is a curse.
Yeah.
You're using your words to harm and to actually in divination too, which is kind of ironic because, I'm a tarot reader and everything else, and people look down upon that like I'm reading the future, but I don't ever. Doctors do it all the time.
Yeah.
No one is going on them for predicting their, the bad futures of their patients. So, yeah, so you are able to overcome that. You're still here. You're still getting treated, correct?
Correct.
So what are some of the things that have helped you in your journey? Like, why do you think you're still here?
I think because I'm actively engaged in my own healthcare. And I'll give you an example of why I say that. One of the diagnostic tools my oncologist used to use was called a PET scan. And that involves basically injecting you with radioactive sugar, with the idea being that cancer cells have a higher metabolism than the rest of your cells. And so they will pick that sugar up at a higher rate. And that's what glows on a scan. Well, nobody ever said to me, hey, Terry, maybe you should cut down on the amount of sugar that you eat. But just from, okay, this is radioactive sugar, cancer likes that. Maybe I should stop making sure that cancer has the things that it likes. So I cut out a lot of, I don't drink, soda. I don't drink alcohol. I drink water. The things that I do are more to benefit my body in the healing process and kind of starve the cancer of the things that it wants or that it needs. So that's one thing that I do. I mentioned to you off air that I do cold therapy. Every time I take a shower, I turn the handle to as cold as it can possibly get. And I sit there for 2 or 3 minutes, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. But that uncomfortableness allows me to go and get my cancer treatments, my clinical trial drug that I'm on, that every time I get it, I have a terrible reaction. I shake violently. I'm nauseous. I throw up. I have a headache. I sweat. It's ugly. But when you do those hard things, when you do those difficult things every day of your life, and they don't have to be big things, those small things every day, it helps you when the big things in life hit us. And they hit us all. We lose somebody who's close to us. We unexpectedly get let go from our job. We find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness. You will be so much more resilient if you do those small things every day. So I do that. I do some a breathing type of technique. I do a kind of meditation. I pray every day. So there are all kinds of things that I do that I hope help my mind as well as my body deal with this disease.
Well, it looks like it's working.
Thank you.
So the cold therapy is interesting. So are you saying that we have to feel uncomfortable in order to become stronger and healthier?
I think that's the only way we're going to grow. I mean, if you're not testing it, and again, it doesn't have to be big things. Find something every day in your life that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you nervous, that's potentially embarrassing. Like I say, it doesn't have to be a big thing. I hate going to the dentist. But the other day I picked up the phone and I was like, all right, I'm going to make my 6-month appointment. And I'm sure there's people out in your audience who are like, well, what's the big deal? When you dislike something as much as I do, like the dentist, it is a big deal. And it's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but it is. It's a small thing that's uncomfortable for me to do. So find those small things. Oh, I don't feel like going to the gym today. Or, you know what? I'm really tired, but I want to stay up and watch. Go to bed. Sleep is one of the best things we can do to help ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, in just having a better life. We're realizing how important sleep is in our lives. Just things that you don't want to do. Anytime you think, I don't want to do it, consider doing it, because it's your mind, it's your mammalian brain telling you, hey, this hurts, this is uncomfortable, stop doing it. And we do. But let me give you a story. This is a true story. It happened back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University here in the US. there was a professor who was doing an experiment with rats. And he put rats in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he put the exact same rats back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Now think about that. The first time, 15 minutes. It's not like, you're going to flunk a test or your business is going to go under or your marriage is going to fail. You're going to die. Your life is over. And the second time around, 60 hours, which taught me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives, that maybe not today, maybe not this week, maybe not even this year, but if you know you're doing the right things, there's a pretty good chance you'll get to where you want to be. And the second thing it taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought we could. I mean, we quit, we give up, we give in long before our physical bodies are, because we listen to our mammalian brains who are saying, this hurts, this is uncomfortable, stop. And so we do. When your brain tells you that, keep going, because you can do a whole lot more.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how emotionally fragile everyone is in our culture. I'll just talk about Americans. But like, no one's dealing with their feelings, and they're pushing everything down and numbing everything, with alcohol or distractions or social media, pick your vice. And then when the big stuff happens, like they fall apart.
They do. And it's, I mean, you made a great point, because, social media allows us to stay on the surface with people. And there's a psychology professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students. He makes them go out and get on a bus. And the idea is, in 3 questions, to be deep with somebody. We don't go deep with people anymore. We stay on the surface. So you get on a bus, you sit down next to someone. Hey, how's it going? Oh, it's going fine. How are you? That's question 1. Question 2, and I'm just making this up. What do you do for a living? That's question 2. Question 3, the person who responds, I'm a doctor. Question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? No, I grew up on a farm. I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or, my mom was my hero and she died when she was 40 and she was a doctor, so I followed in her. Now you're deep with somebody. Now you're finding out what matters to them and why they do what they do. We don't do that with other human beings. And for me, that's an incredibly gratifying thing to do. I like going deep with people. I like asking questions of people to get to know who they really are, not this surface stuff that social media allows us to do.
Oh, me too. I am one of those people also. I want to know how people grew up. What did they like? What did they dislike? What did they love? I mean, I go into the deep stuff right away. All this surface talk is so boring. It really is.
And it's funny because my wife is in the financial services industry, and we used to go to the obligatory Christmas party every year, and I used to kind of make a sort of a game out of it. I used to tell her, I said, all right, I'm going to go into this party and I'm going to meet 5 of your colleagues who I've never met before. And I said, at the end of the night, I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell you, how they met their spouse, how many kids they have, where their kids go to school, where they went. I'm going to give you the whole 9 yards. And I said, not only that, is Monday when you go back to work, they're going to come to you and tell you what a great guy that I am. And yet they're not going to be able to tell you anything about me, because very rarely do people reciprocate with, hey, where did you go to school? Where did you go to school? How did you meet your wife? How did you meet your wife? We're narcissistic. We love talking about ourselves. But if you want to be a great conversationalist, just ask people about themselves and be quiet. They'll think you're the greatest person in the world.
Yeah, it's true. People love to talk about themselves. And that's okay, because people have stories to tell that are really interesting.
They do. They really do. And I think there's a lot of people probably listening to us that think, well, my life isn't that special. My life isn't, I don't really have anything to contribute. What would anybody learn from me? But this is another true story I'll tell you. One of the nurses who was taking care of me when I started out, on this infusion drug that I've been on for the last 4 years. She was already a nurse, but she was young. She's about 25 years old, and she was learning how to do things on the unit. And about 6 months later, she was by herself taking care of me. And she came in and she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I really don't know how to tell it to you. And Tina, I didn't know how to respond to that. What do you say to somebody that tells you something? I said, well, I hope you decide you want to tell it to me. I'm sure I'd enjoy hearing it. So she's in and out for the next couple hours and finally comes in, sits down. She says, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked it over with my family. I was going to quit nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see what you go through every day in terms of your reactions to the medication. And then I went back in your file and I read, you had your foot amputated in 2018, you had your leg amputated in 2020, all the things that you've been through your journey. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had had such a positive impact on this individual. So anybody who's out there listening to us think your life doesn't matter. I promise you, there are people that are watching you from on far, kind of looking at how you handle the adversity and the difficulty in your life. And I'll guarantee you there's people out there that would give almost everything they have just to spend 5 minutes in your shoes. So your life matters. You have something to contribute.
Yeah, if you're alive and you're here, there you have a purpose.
Yep.
Now you have to figure out what that purpose is. Yep. So you've been on 700 podcasts, Terry. So why is that? And is this part of your purpose?
I believe it is. I never expected. I didn't even know what a podcast was. I started a speaking business, and then COVID hit, and like everything else, nobody was doing anything either virtually or in person. And I had a friend of mine reach out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to be, a guest on my podcast? You can get your message out that way." I said, "Sure." What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. It's true. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it is. And he explained it to me, and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And Tina, my first podcast, I was horrible. I provided no value to the audience. I had Post-it notes all around the camera. He would ask me a question. I kind of lean in and I'd read one of the Post-it notes. I was horrible. But then I thought back on my life. It's like first time I drove a car, I wasn't any good at it. First time I cooked a meal, I think I burned the water. First time I studied algebra, I wasn't any good at it. But I wanted to be good at it. And so how do you get good at it? You listen to every podcast you've been on. Do you have good stories? How many filler words do you use? All these kind of things. It's like, okay, that's not a good story. I got to get a better story. Or I say hum or whatever. Too much. I've got to cut that down. I've got to slow down. Just different things like that got me to a point where I don't think I've been on a podcast that I should not have been on. I think in a lot of ways, for me, I have a very strong faith in God. I think this is a way to get a message out with the understanding that I don't have all the answers, but I've learned a lot during this 12 plus year cancer journey that I just like to offer to people in the hope that maybe it will help them along their journey as well.
And this is your legacy, Terry. It's out there now. Maybe hundreds of years from now, your great grandchild is going to listen to 700 episodes of my great grandparent, and he's going to learn so much about you. Like how much do we know about even our own grandparents and great grandparents?
Right.
But you put it out there, and that's why I do the podcast too. This is my second podcast, and it's out there. And I've written 2 books this year. It's going to be out there. It's going to be out there for whoever needs it and for my descendants, which is a beautiful thing.
It really is. And it's funny because about 6 months ago, I had a young man send me an email who I'd never met before. And he said, I just listened to your podcast and it was something I really needed to hear today. I said, great. So what was the name of the podcast? And he sent it to me. And I was like, I don't remember that one. And so I went back and looked at it. And it was a podcast I had done like 3 years ago that he had found and listened to because he needed to hear it today. Yeah, you're right. I mean, what you're doing, what I'm doing, it's evergreen. It'll be out there for people who need it who want to hear it, like you say, hundreds of years from now.
Yeah, even in social media, you think nobody's liking anything, no one's reading it. People are reading it, and once in a while, I'll get a message too. I read this post. I had a childhood friend that sent me a message. Didn't even know she was reading my stuff on Facebook. And she says, I've been reading it and I love your posts and they inspire me.
Yeah. See, your life matters. Even if you don't think it does, your life matters.
And you're not always going to get that feedback, but when you do, it's wonderful. And but know that like there are probably a lot more people that didn't even write you that message that you have affected in a positive way.
Exactly.
I don't think there's anything better than that on the planet, actually.
No, it's pretty special when you make a difference in somebody's life that you had no idea that you made that difference. You're right.
Yeah. So where are you now on your journey? And I wanted to ask you, have you looked at like the spiritual significance of your, your health struggles and what that means or what that symbolizes?
I mean, I have. Back in 2019, I had all 88 genes that doctors know of or suspect cause every single form of cancer that we know of on the planet tested. And I have absolutely no mutations in any of my genes for any form of cancer, which sort of begs the question, then why did I get this incredibly rare form of melanoma? Nobody's ever been able to give me an answer for that question. It's not a question I spend a great deal of time worrying about. I got it. Obviously it's taken parts of my body throughout the course of the disease, but I'm still here. And I really think I'm here not for me. I'm here because God wants me to be here. And I like to think that God, or whatever you believe that to be or don't believe, is using my infirmity to show his grace, his love, his healing, his power, and things like that. So I have no problem having the creator of the universe use me in whatever format he wants me to be used. So that's why I think I've done 700 podcasts. I had no interest I never picked a number. It was just these things happen. And the more I did, the more people heard about it. Hey, would you like to be on my show? Sure. And like I said, I don't ever think I've been on a podcast that I shouldn't have been on. Now, don't get me wrong. I've been on podcasts where the host should not have had a podcast. They were terrible at what they did. But somebody out there needed to hear the message that we were discussing. And so that's that spiritual side of it. This is way bigger than just some goofy guy like me having cancer and what's going on with it. It's much bigger than me.
Definitely. And, you're an inspiration to a lot of people, to anyone who's had a diagnosed terminal illness, and you're still here today. So what would you advise someone who has been diagnosed or has been told that they have that type of illness? What would be your advice for them?
I would tell you to find meaning in your misery. I mean, you need to find some type of meaning. And I've seen so many people that become negative and become mad and I went through that. I mean, I think back on when I was diagnosed. I think I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief when I was first diagnosed. First it was denial. My dad had cancer when I graduated from college. I'd done everything right in my life. I ate right. I exercised. I didn't abuse alcohol and drugs. I did none of that stuff. And yet I got this rare form of cancer. And then there was I got mad. I've done everything right in my life. How can I possibly have this form of cancer? And then there was a sort of a bargaining, I guess, with God that our daughter was in high school at the time. It's like, look, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got down, got depressed, felt sorry for myself. But then I just got to a point where this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I do not like the cards that I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And that's really what I've been trying to do for these last 12 years. I mean, I don't want your audience to think, you're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I have bad days. When I go for treatment, I feel down. I cry. I feel sorry for myself. But when I'm doing that, I find that I'm looking inward, like, woe is me. Look how horrible this is. And I find a real easy way to flip that around is to then go help somebody else. Go just say hi to somebody, to, ask them how they're doing, seeing somebody in the waiting room when I'm waiting for treatment, and you can just tell these people they're scared, they're nervous, they're uncomfortable. They've just got that look on their face. And just by saying, hey, how you doing? Oh, wait a minute. Somebody sees me. Somebody sees that I'm hurting right now and is willing to at least engage in a conversation with me. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not focused on me anymore. I'm focused on trying to make a difference in somebody else's life. It's a real simple way to flip that negativity around into something that's a lot more positive.
And that's the secret to happiness, is serving others and helping others. Take the focus off of yourself and just living day to day and doing simple things like hello and acknowledging people and asking about themselves and engaging in conversation and validating them.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, when I was a hostage negotiator, we would be blocks away negotiating with somebody. And I remember when I first started, they're like, okay, when you start negotiating with a person, smile. I'm like, smile? I'm 2 blocks away from the person. They can't see me smile. They're like, no, smile, because it comes across in the way you deliver your message. And the more I learned, the more I studied, the more I read, we have mirror neurons in our brain. So if you smile at somebody, you engage their mirror neurons and they'll smile back at you. They don't even realize they're doing it. Imagine how we feel when we smile. We're not down, we're not depressed. Smiling puts a whole new take on our lives. So just, hey, how you doing? And smile at another individual. It's amazing how much better that'll make them feel.
Yeah. So if you're out there listening, do this as an experiment. Because I do this, and everyone I interact with, the cashier at the grocery store, I smile at them. Mm-hmm. And you can tell some of them are a little shocked that you're smiling at them. And I always am very polite and thank them and tell them they have a great day afterwards. And it just, that little boost that maybe that person needed that day. And it's free. It didn't take long, and it's effective.
It's very effective. And even, and this is going to sound self-serving, but this works. Read the person. Say you're at the airport and your flight just got canceled, and you're in line, you get up to the counter, the person's, you're like the 500th person they've dealt with today, and everybody's mad and everybody's upset. But if you look at that agent, that ticket agent, and say, man, looks like you're having a tough day. Boom. All of a sudden that person feels, hey, somebody sees me. Somebody realizes I'm having a tough day. And who knows, maybe you'll get an upgrade. Maybe you'll get a free hotel. Maybe you'll get a voucher. Who knows what you'll get? But just by reading another human being, hey, you don't look like, and I think part of that was from my law enforcement career. I can look at people's faces and just be like, hey, you're not having a good day today. Are you feeling okay? Did you get up late, or you've been running, you've been behind the 8 ball the whole day, whatever. Just acknowledging the fact that people are having a tough day. It's amazing what that does to help them help you maybe get something that you never expected to get.
Yeah, I remember I got coffee at a bookstore, and the young lady kept apologizing to me. And I said, you know what? You don't need to apologize. And she said, oh, it's a trauma response. And I said, I understand, but you don't need to apologize to me. It's okay.
Yeah. I have a nurse who, when she takes care of me, I love her. She's a great nurse. She's very compassionate. But everything she says is, I'm sorry. It's like, hey, there was an auto accident on the way, to the hospital today. Oh, I'm so sorry. Why are you sorry? You didn't have the accident. I mean, everything is, I'm sorry. And it's almost to the point where it's not genuine. It's just your response. It's what you say. And it gets to a point, especially when she takes care of me for like 6 or 7 hours, it's like, oh my God, please don't say I'm sorry again. Because, that's just me. That's my problem, not hers. But she's a very kind and compassionate person, but she internalizes everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, that peeling off that piece of tape hurt. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. You know what? Hey, you stick a needle in me. Sometimes it's going to hurt. You got to deal with the pain.
Yeah. And it's not your responsibility.
Yeah.
Not everything's your responsibility.
Exactly.
So, well, Terry, I love having you on the show again. I think you're inspirational. You're a very good guest. You can tell because you always give me a chance to talk as well. Sometimes we have guests that don't let our host talk that much. So
I tell my story and then I be quiet. So it's like, you know what?
yeah, I know you had a book that we talked about last time. Have you written anything new or since
I
then?
have. Yeah, I wrote a book back in 2020 when I was healing from my leg amputation called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And when I wrote that book, even when I published it, there was always something inside of me. It was like, I've got another book here. There's another book. That was a book about success, about how people could be successful in their lives. And I always felt there was another book that also started with a word with the letter S, and that was significance. Success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we are, what we do for other people. Don't get me wrong. I think you can be both. I think you can be successful and significant. But I wanted to write another book about significance. And so I've literally just finished it. I've got the draft out to 6 or 7 people that are really good friends of mine that are honest enough to say, hey, Terry, this is terrible, or you need to expand that, whatever it is. I need brutal honesty with them. And this one's called 4 Truths and a Lie. So hopefully I'll get it published early next year. So that's what I've been working on probably for the last year and a half now.
Oh, good. So can you share with the listeners where they can find you and find your books?
Yeah, Sustainable Excellence is available anywhere you can get your books online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks. And you can reach out to me, leave me a message at motivationalcheck.com. That's kind of my website /blog.
Great. Well, thank you, Terry, for being on the show. It's good to see you. It's been a couple of years. And again, if you want to check out the other episode on the My Weirdest Experience podcast, that's season 1, episode 42. And that's available on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, all of those places. And thank you for being on the show.
Tina, thanks for having me on. It was great seeing you and talking with you again.
All right. Take care.
You too.